Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Demar. I'm the Global Chief Growth Officer of Ipsos. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today. And even though my role is global, today I'm going to talk to you about the US and how the current crisis has impacted us, how Americans are feeling, how Americans are behaving, and the implications for our clients. So I call this presentation Navigating the Perfect Storm, because as you will see, COVID-19 is the tip of the iceberg for Americans. It's a large tip, to be sure, but it's not the only thing that we are dealing with right now. To understand the subtitle, which says, without a compass, all you have to do is look at this image on the right of the screen. So we often feel that we are adrift in the storm without strong, clear, and aligned leadership in the US. Leadership that acknowledges the terrible situation that we're all in right now, that we're all facing right now. But at least I can say he's wearing a mask. He's not wearing it correctly, but at least he's wearing a mask. Okay, so as of today, the US has over 4.8 million coronavirus cases and 157,000 deaths. It's a lot. And these numbers are continuing to grow as many states reopened too early. Cases are increasing now in 30 states, including California, Florida, and Texas. More than 6,300 people died from COVID-19 in the US just last week, and that's the third straight week that we've seen deaths rising in the US. Younger people in their 20s and 30s make up the largest proportion of new cases right now. On top of that, or maybe because of that, the economy has been severely impacted. The unemployment rate increased from a 50-year low of 3.5% in February of this year to a staggering 14.7% in April. It has since fallen in June to around 11%, which is still high, but at least it's encouraging because it's going in the right direction. And then, of course, there's the social unrest that is unsettling the nation. The murder of George Floyd on May 25th triggered a wave of protests against police brutality and ignited an anti-racism movement. With somewhere between 15 and 20 million people participating in protests in the US, this has become the largest movement in US history. So you can see it's a perfect storm, and it's consumed the nation with severe economic, social, and health concerns all converging. The US economy contracted at 32.9% in the second quarter of this year. It's the worst drop on record. The coronavirus recession is the deepest on record, actually, since the Great Depression. So in the recent wave of, this is data from our global Ipsos tracker that we call Essentials, you can see that COVID-19 and health concerns dominate in India and in Latin America. And so the COVID-19 is the orange bars there. But nearly a quarter of Americans, so that's the starred line, the US data, say that politics, social unrest, or inequality are their top concerns. That's right here, and it's huge, more than any other country. Americans, as a result of this perfect storm that we're in, they're more likely to see things as being out of control. If you look at the blue bars, the dark blue bars, you can see that China, Germany, South Korea, and Canada indicate that things are fairly stable right now. But in the US, also in Brazil, by the way, they see things quite differently. Citizens also in most countries anticipate that another wave of the virus will hit, and that's the teal bars here on the right-hand side. So take a look at this video filmed by our Ethnography Center of Excellence.
The biggest change is it's constantly changing. Nothing stays the same. Every day, my thoughts and my opinions, my feelings change. I don't know who to believe, what to believe. It's very, very frustrating.
So that perfectly conveys the sentiment of many Americans. Americans like when things are stable and when things are predictable. The uncertainty and inconsistency that has characterized the pandemic has made it a very, very difficult and frustrating situation for Americans. And as a result, like that man in the video, many Americans are feeling a considerable level of frustration, and you can see that in these kind of red circles here, and this is the US bar. People in the US are used to their freedoms and they're feeling less empowered, which is the purple circles there. People in Mexico and Brazil are frustrated as well, but not to the same level as Americans right now. So this slide I think is very interesting. So when asked about how they will resume their regular activities, nearly half of citizens across countries said they will either change many things about the way they live, or they will change their lives completely. And that's a growing trend from past waves of this study. But if you look at the US data, which is all the way to the bottom there, 54% of Americans say they will make many changes or completely change their activities. But that increased 11% versus the prior wave, more than any other country. And the reason is that, fear of getting sick has reached an all-time high. They're just more afraid than ever of getting sick. So this is data here from our longitudinal community in the US. And fear of getting sick, all-time high for Americans right now. And as a result, they're becoming less convinced that we should reopen and that less convinced that we should allow the economy to restart. That number has decreased versus the prior wave. So it went from 49% to 47%, and it's the lowest of any country. Are we starting to see a pattern here? So this is the COVID-19 journey framework. It reflects the stages that people go through during difficult times. There are 10 phases to this emotional journey. And it begins with, if you look all the way to the left, with uncertainty, moving through preparation and adjustment and acclimation as people start to settle in and get used to things. And then there are several phases as people start to come out of the crisis, eventually ending with a period of rebuilding and settling in and adapting to a new normal. What's interesting about this chart, and this chart is for the US, by the way, it's based on data from our longitudinal community, is that people are starting to revert back to earlier phases as the cases increase in the US and as they go back to, again, constraining their activities, going back into lockdown, that type of thing. People who fall in, again, on the left, into the preparation, adjustment, and acclimation phases are once again increasing. So what this shows is that the crisis is likely going to ebb and flow with periods of recovery, followed by periods of regression, meaning that in total it will take some time to recover. So how is this perfect storm affecting our clients, and what are we hearing from clients? Well, this is data from Deloitte, and it shows how different sectors in the US are weathering the crisis, and of course they're not all affected equally. So if you look all the way to the right, you can see that pharma, grocery retailers, food and beverage companies, personal and household goods manufacturers, they're weathering the storm well, or at least they're experiencing a lower impact of the crisis, let's say it like that. On the other hand, if you look to the left, sectors like automotive, apparel, oil and gas, food service and hotel industries, of course, banking and payments, even technology are experiencing more difficulty right now. Now, of course, technology is a very broad bucket, and what we have found is that internet platform companies like Amazon are doing well, while media and consumer electronics companies are struggling more. So this has in turn led to lots of different questions coming in from our clients, and we've been tracking this activity from since the third week of March, when questions centered more around which products and services consumers were adopting more during the crisis, and which behaviors were likely to stick post-COVID. And we're still, of course, getting that question from clients today. Everybody wants to know what behaviors will stick. In April, the questions started to pivot more to the role of brands. So how should brands communicate now? how to identify a brand's purpose given the current context, how to start planning for an uncertain future using scenario planning. And recently, we've been getting more questions from clients about the role of insights, the role of the insights function in their companies. It's shifted during the crisis to focus more on things like curation of thought leadership, providing a strategic perspective to the CEO and the CMO. And also, interestingly, the insights functions have been pivoting to serving other functions outside of marketing. Agility and insights on demand are also big themes that we're hearing from clients. Now, as time passes, clients are wondering how they can shape versus just react to changing consumer sentiments. That's also a big trend now. These are the top 10 business decisions that clients across sectors are facing post-COVID. And I'll just go through them because I think they're all very interesting. What are the societal shifts that will result from the COVID-19 crisis? And how will those shifts be impacting consumer behavior? What can we do as a company to reignite demand that has fallen off? How do we adjust our portfolio in light of this economic recession? Should we be making changes and tweaks to that? How has the consumer experience and the path to purchase changed, particularly as it relates to e-commerce? So going back to my comments earlier. When do we return to our communications and marketing plan? So when do we restart and how do we adjust it when we do? Of all of the existing knowledge that we have, how much of that is actually still valid? How much of that can we take forward? And how much needs to be refreshed or revisited? Do I need to redo my segmentation, for example, or does it still make sense? How quickly and to what level will consumers return to non-distanced venues? So how quickly will they go back to visiting stores or going back to traveling or participating in different events? Do we revise, refine, advance our innovation pipeline? What changes do we make to where and how we innovate? Do we continue with the same plans that we had previously for sustainability, for corporate social responsibility initiatives? And how do we ensure that our business is compliant with all of the emerging guidelines that are coming out from governments and the policies around COVID-19? These are the questions that we're getting from clients now. And just to give you an idea, perhaps, of the kinds of shifts that we're seeing. So about a quarter of shoppers in the US have had to buy brands during the crisis that they normally wouldn't purchase, either because things were too expensive or there was availability issues and their typical brand was not available. That figure is actually the same for Mexico and for China. India and South Africa, it's even higher. Now, if your brand is on the receiving end of this free trial, that's great. You know, I mean, it's hard to get trial. Then the need and you need to change your focus to, well, how do I retain all of those newfound users? Here's another thing that we're seeing. According to McKinsey, e-commerce penetration grew from 13% to 31% in the month of April alone. That's a really huge shift. A big driver of that was food spending. So according to BCG, Boston Consulting Group, 35% of food spending is shifting to new channels. Online food and beverage sales grew 85% year on year, 85% year on year in April in the US as spending shifted from brick and mortar to e-commerce. And a significant portion of that, 33 to about 40% of those online grocery shoppers were first-time users. That trend, we believe, is likely to continue in the US because consumers are increasingly being driven online, but also retailers and manufacturers are continuing to invest in e-commerce. So again, that reinforces the need for US clients to understand this new and disrupted consumer decision journey so that they can optimize their touchpoint strategy along the path to purchase. One thing that we know will drive consumer choice going forward is offering value. Over 40%, if you look to the left there, of consumers now have reduced income, and they therefore have reported that they're cutting their spending. 63% of consumers are shopping more cost consciously, and 4 out of 5 say they will continue to do that. Retailers are under economic pressure as well, because consumers are demanding that they implement very costly operating practices, like cleaning their stores or their restaurants or restricting their occupancy. In EY's June 25th Future Consumer Report, here that you can see on the right-hand side, they're forecasting that affordability first, there at the bottom, 36%, will be the most prominent segment in terms of new normal values, larger even than health, larger than sustainability. So we anticipate in the US that this perfect storm is going to be with us for a while. We will continue to monitor how people are feeling, how they're behaving, so that we can help our clients to address the many business questions that are arising at this time. I thank you for listening, and please be well